This is Matt Rosen, and this is the Grit Mindset with me, your host, Matt Rosen. The mission of the Grit Mindset is to inspire and empower our listeners by delving deep into the journeys of those who have faced significant challenges and emerged stronger. Through authentic conversations, we uncover the mindsets, strategies, and lessons that have propelled these individuals to overcome adversity and achieve success. My aim is to provide actionable insights and real-world advice to help our listeners cultivate their own grit and navigate their personal and professional lives with confidence and resilience. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Grit Mindset with Matt Rosen. I'm your host. Today, I've got a former coworker and friend, Vimal Vachhani with CREx Software, joining me on the show. Vimal, welcome. It's great to have you.
Yeah, good to be here.
Well, Vimal, to get started, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Vimal Vachhani from CREx Software. We are, best way to describe it is that we're a software with a services company. We focus solely on commercial real estate organizations, we started originally helping with data and analytics, and we've sort of since evolved into, going really kind of across the whole vertical with our expertise.
Very cool. What made you go down the real estate path? What was interesting about that sector to you?
That's a great question. I started my career originally in consulting and went horizontal across technology. So I, was data and data analytics. So I ended up touching on pharma, CPG, healthcare, chemicals. And it was around 2015 when I landed, I think, on a real estate client. It got to a point where I was like, maybe I should go vertical and start specializing, played the field long enough on industry. Yeah. And it was just an industry that really just started making sense to me. And when you're in data and analytics, you're sort of seeing the lifeblood of a lot of clients. So it's, what drives it, what decisions are being made. It's less of a technical role than it is business.
Right.
And at that point, it was just easy to parlay when you see the data. Well, you could help out with asset management. You could help out with underwriting. And just continued to sort of dig in and go vertical from there and evolved into, was consulting in the space at the time. And we were seeing, large institutional players calling in these projects. And when somebody smaller would call in, based on what AUM they would get priced out of these very expensive consulting projects.
Yeah, what's AUM for our listeners?
Yeah, assets under management.
Great. So how many buildings you own?
Yeah, how many buildings you own, the value of those. But, what we started seeing was that if you were under a certain amount, you still had the same needs as some of the large organizations. You just didn't have the money to spend. And from my perspective, if you were looking at a report, your balance sheet, for example, a balance sheet is a balance sheet, whether you have 100 properties or 10. It's just a data volume problem.
Right.
So I started thinking through and rattling the idea around in my head on how can you build something that serves, the lower end of the market just as well as the upper end, and start there and then work our way up. So that was sort of the initial idea. And here we are 4 years later, and just sort of growing.
No, that's awesome. So you career consultant, grew up in the tech side, right?
Yeah, very much tech side.
So decide you want to be an industry expert in real estate, and now have carved yourself a niche in serving both large and small real estate clients, but going in with a business-focused lens, understanding their lingo, and be able to help them with technical solutions. Is that fair?
Yeah, that was key. With what I always tell folks, it's when you need a technical person, there's 1,000 people.
Right.
When you need a real estate person, there's 1,000 people on the side. Finding somebody that intersects between the two is much harder to find. And we as we grow and we hire, it's a problem we now face as well. Do you find somebody and train them, or do you find sort of that unicorn in between? So we started our business it was just me, and then brought in a co-founder at one point, and I was like, well, I'll be that intersection person, figure out what this is, and then start bringing people on board. And you find some gems along the way. Sure.
Yeah, we'll definitely want to talk more about building the organization. Was there anything, in your early life that got you kind of down this path of wanting to be an entrepreneur? Did you ever think you'd own your own company?
Yeah, I think there was a part of me that always wanted to. It's interesting. So I was born in Toronto, but I was first generation here. My parents had immigrated, and it took me many, many years. I didn't know this at the time, but we were raised a very certain way, and a roadmap was laid out at a very early age. you do this, you go to this school, you get into college, you get a job, and the playbook, and it's a very safe playbook. And
get a job, work for a company forever, hopefully get a pension, which don't exist anymore.
Yeah, there's no more pensions anymore, but yeah, you might get a watch on the way out. But you pack the 401k, and again, that's no criticism of that path.
No,
I think that's
lots of people go that path.
Yeah, and there's a lot of value in that. Maybe it's how I was wired, who knows, but it just didn't feel right. But I went on that path, and I went on that path for a very long time. First job out of college, I went industry, and that immediately just didn't feel right. The cubicles and the white buzzing lights,
office space,
yeah.
Culture, yeah.
And so I immediately was like, what's my first entry point into something that's safe and entrepreneurial, and consulting was the next best. So in your 20s, the idea of being on a plane and being in a different city sounds amazing. You then do it, and you do it for 10 years, and you're like, you hit 30, and you're like, this is terrible.
It's fun for a little while.
Yeah. So I knew I wanted to start something. I think activation energy or momentum are really dangerous, because you're like, well, I'll do it next year. Mm-hmm. And 1, 5, 10 years go by real fast in that. And your pay is going up as well. So the idea of safety and security also starts building. So to pull the ripcord and make the jump is very hard.
What was the moment where you decided, I've had enough, I want this to be mine, I want to do my own thing? Was there an event or a set of events that led you to that decision?
Yeah, there's like this compressed 3-month period where I think all of that happened at once. Where it was in Dallas, and I was starting to look and start thinking about relocating, and just sort of felt like I was in a rut for a long time. And I remember this moment, just at home staring at the palm court ceiling, and there's this concept. Are you familiar with the no zero days?
No, please tell us about that. I'm not.
Yeah, and it's a framework, but it's sort of actually used a lot in the mental health space, where folks that are in depressive states, the goal is to have a non-zero day, do something, go for a walk.
Okay.
So again, not to make, that's a very, very serious, concept and use that. But for me, kind of thinking about that, of thinking about these goals that I want, accepting that these are going to take a long time to get to, but every day, is there something small I could do?
Right.
Towards the goal of starting my own business, putting pen to paper, spinning up the website, buying the domain, starting to, build out the framework. Just, can I do a little bit? And, that was about 2 years of doing that, because I ended up moving to New York, took another consulting job, and sort of spun on that for a while until when the timing felt right. And same thing happened. The timing never felt right. And then COVID hit. So when COVID hit, rents dropped, things got quiet, there was nothing to do. It felt like the right time to let me roll the dice for about a year.
So you did that in the middle of COVID. They letting you out of the house in New York?
Yeah. New York. Yeah. So New York City, no one's on the street. Times Square is a ghost town. It was a weird time and a weird place to be. But we're like, well, why not, right? Let me see what I could do just by putting this out in the universe. And, honestly, it was 3 months in when somebody called, and they were out of Florida, and it was our first client, and they're still actually one of our clients. They were That's great. We need help with data. We saw your blog post. And I still have that check framed on my desk. And, I think that little bit of validation just was enough activation energy to say, we're going to stick this through. And yes, there's been a lot of waves as we've gone up and down, but just being we're building on that no zero days, throwing spaghetti on the wall, putting it out there in the universe, and really just sort of standing in traffic. You're not going to hit by a car until you stand in traffic, and that car from Florida hit us.
Yeah. What's been, I guess, the biggest learning in starting your own thing?
It's really hard.
Yes, I agree.
There's a lot of sleep deprivation, and we ended up, we have an amazing baby boy born 2 years ago.
Congrats.
Sort of aligned with when we restructured building the business, and I got to many points where I was like, shoot, it might be time to sell, or maybe this is really hard to do. And the best advice I could give you is find a partner that's just like 100%. She was the one that was like, stick it out. You just got this off the brand. People are starting to call and we've recognized you. We know the brand. And a lot of time and energy went into that. And she was right. I think with this journey since then has been amazing. But had somebody told me how hard it was at the time, I don't know if I would do it.
Yeah.
But you always have this, well, in 6 months it'll be better. So there is a little bit of bliss in the ignorance of not knowing how you underestimate like what you could do in a year and you overestimate 10 years.
Yeah.
I think that's the right phrase. But knowing that I got 10 years to do this, we could do it the right way. We purposely did not take any outside funding. So that one, in a certain way, like we get to do this our way. And that way is, take time, do it right, do it on relationships, do it on hard work, and sell on quality. And
totally makes sense. Well, congrats on the early success. So you're on the grit mindset, and so I ask every guest, what does grit mean to you, whether personally or professionally?
Yeah, I feel like I conflate grit and hustle.
Yeah.
And I'm probably on the earlier side of folks you've probably spoken to. So again, interview me in 5 years, all of this might be
we'll have you on in 5 years. We'll see
because I'm like, everything failed. It was a disaster. And all my hair is gone and I'm 20 more pounds heavier. So I originally conflated that with hustle. It's just how do you work longer, faster, harder? And I still, neglect rest. Like if I'm not doing anything and I'm not spending time with family, it's like, what should I be doing to help grow? And I'm trying to now actively unwire myself from that. Talking to folks like yourself, other folks that have really stepped in to be mentors on how to build smart, opposed to my strategy, which is just close your eyes and run through every door and wall you can, and just will things into existence.
Well, you have to do that to get started.
Yeah, and the hard part that I'm trying to figure out now is when are we out of we've willed things into existence and we're into like the machine is now turned on and we need to just continue to build the machine. And I feel like that happened about this year.
Yeah.
This year is stay paused. Like we don't need to say yes to everything. I don't need to be on everything. I have a team that's growing. They're really great. I could hand that trust off. And again, I just don't need to run through every door the hard way. Well,
thanks. You took a little time away from your team meeting you're doing this week to come do the podcast. So appreciate you coming and sharing the story.
Yeah.
Tell us about what's going on there.
Yeah. Well, it's just great to be back in Dallas. Dallas is my second home. I spent 18 years in Toronto. Then I spent 18 years in Dallas.
Okay.
At this rate, I'll spend 18 years in New York, and then I'll find the last 18 years to go to ride off in the sunset. So yeah, we're getting the team together. It's our first on-site. We were like a remote-only company, which is great in some ways, and in other ways, culture building becomes hard. But also, it's time to say we're growing up to the next stage. What does this look like? I think a hard lesson for me was I thought everyone was like me. They were motivated by the same things I were. And everyone's like, no, I don't want to work until 2 a.m. And, so coming up and creating frameworks for what it looks like for people to succeed and what motivates people individually, and seeing if we build a culture and a business and work that's exciting to those folks. So, and just get some face-to-face with folks, which is really valuable.
How have you, and this is a challenge I face myself, and a lot of it comes down to hiring really good people and incentivizing them and giving them a place to grow. But what have you personally done to kind of instill that sense of grit within your team? They're obviously not going to burn it quite like you, but maybe get half of the way there.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think initially in the early growth years, it's easier because when you bring on people you've worked with in the past. So the relationship is already there, and understanding the capacity and what drives people is already there. We now have started to enter a stage where we're bringing in people that we don't have the history with, I think we're actively figuring that out. I don't think I'm going to have the best answer to it, to be honest. I think we're starting to figure out the lanes of what are different motivation factors for folks and what are goals for folks, and then seeing if we could layer in a spot that or multiple spots that line up that. So some people are just fascinated by like innovation. Well, we definitely have that. Yeah. Some folks are very, fascinated, just really want to do good work, but then they want time with their family. So can we create structures and projects that exist like that? Some people want to start their own business at some point, and you could see that in folks. So I know they're not going to be there forever, but they're clawing at the ability to help out on as many deals as they can, and I could use that help. And knowing that, I used to do that to you guys, right? Like I was like, can I please come to the conference? And you're like, no.
But then you did, and it worked out well.
Yeah, and I think I manned the booth, and the worst. We could have an hour talk on how manning booth is like the worst. But
yeah, it's not fun.
Yeah, because you guys are out shaking hands and having coffees and having lunches, and we're standing at the booth being like, can I have a minute of your time?
Come by, please.
Please, yes.
Alms for the poor.
Yes, would you? Here's a pen and a Hershey's Kiss. So. Really, it's just, like what, but some people really love that, right? So then also understanding, we didn't do the personality test. When I first started, there was a lot of things where I was like, oh, the whole meets expectation frameworks, the personality test. I was like, I'm never going to do that. And we're at a point where I'm like, I see the value of that. And I think I don't want to go too far into that, but taking the time and energy to understand what the business needs to be, also what the people want to be and what they need to be, is like a full-time job in itself.
It is. Well, you're figuring it out fast, and I agree. I got to the point where I hired everyone I knew. You start hiring people you don't know, and you're like, you want to tell everyone the story of how it got going, but are they going to be inspired the same as those that you knew and part of the early journey? And that's one of the challenges for every founder, and I think you're addressing it in a lot of the right ways. One thing I'd like to dive into is maybe what's been the most challenging event or story you can share from getting this off the ground?
So, like I mentioned, I had a co-founder that I had brought on earlier to help grow, and we had started building the business into the vision that we originally thought it should go. And I mentioned that I was in consulting, so when I started this, we dug our heels in. We're like, we're not going to be consultants. Mm-hmm. We're going to build software. We're going to build software as a service. We're going to 2021. The story of you get VC money and then you raise Series A, Series B was like the dream, and hustle culture was really coming at the point. And, you get to a point, you're like, this is growing really slowly. It might not be the right product market fit. It's not venture scale. Do we want to raise? Do we want to be something else? So just the hard part was the timing of making those decisions to where my co-founder exited. I decided to bring on the whole thing. We're making these decisions 3 weeks before the baby's born.
Oh, wow.
The worst time. Yeah. And, the decision is like, do I take this savings that I have that are potentially going to be this kid's college savings and be like, let's go, put it all on red.
Yeah.
So, the baby's, 3 weeks later after the baby's born, we've ramped down. We were 3 people and both of them exited. So it's just me.
Brand new child, put all your money into the business.
Yeah, this new roommate who wakes up every 45 minutes. And a large amount of capital that's been moved over. Clients that we had that we were still having to support. And not enough revenue to justify like leaving a career in consulting. Was this the right call?
And you'd already left your previous company to start?
Oh yeah, we were like a year and a half in at this point.
Gotcha.
So the boats were already burned, and being like, all right, now what? So that decision point, we were like, we were doing software. Folks were saying, great, you have our data. Can you do consulting? Can you do this? Can you help us with data governance? I don't think AI was around, but similar conversations. Can you help?
We definitely want to hit on that next.
Yeah, I think at that time they're like, can you help us with blockchain? And we're like, no one's going to be doing blockchain in 5 years. And it was hard just to be like, all right, let's start doing one building block at a time and start putting this together. And dots always connect looking backwards, but at the time you're like, it's a pretty scary spot to be in, and it was hard. And even a couple months after that, again, I was like, do we just jettison this? Because the amount of time and work that's going in, I could be, you do the math is just I could be making more working.
Yeah.
So do I bet on myself? And again, just my wife is just, she's like, stick it through. There's something here. And it's enough motivation to just,
keep going.
And I told her, I was like, yes, it might get somewhere, but it's going to take 3 years. I think at the time we're like 6 months. So there's bliss in the ignorance.
So your co-founder, other employee exited, you're still supporting software, you pivot into consulting. That's the play.
Yeah, well, we came up with I feel like I came up with the term, but I've heard it more. It's software with a service.
Got it.
So it's a blend of the two.
Okay.
They go hand in hand and they sort of cross-sell each other. But, we just found that there's, when folks come in for software, they're down market, they're looking for efficient solutions. And to be like, well, you need consulting, you should spend another $500,000. You don't get the same profile. So I don't think I ever wanted to abandon the mid-market and below, because that's where the vision was like, these consulting projects are great and there's people that can afford it. And then there's groups that are smaller that have the same needs. They're the exact same needs. It's just the amount of data they're working with is going to be smaller.
Yeah.
And that's trivial. So you should be able to do that, charge them less if you commoditize it. And that has proven correct. And we're sort of iterating from there.
So you haven't abandoned the original mission, you just added to it.
Yeah. I think a big lesson learned for us on the software side, or just across the board, was, are you familiar with the vitamins and aspirins?
I am, but I'd love for you to explain it to everyone.
All right.
Or vitamins and painkillers.
So we got to the point, I was like, we're selling a vitamin, right? It's something that's like a nice to have. If you have time, you take it. If you're diligent, you take it. But if things get, you could skip it for 5-10 days and you're fine.
Yeah.
And you'll, if it runs out, you're not going to run to the grocery store and buy it immediately. So we got to a point where what I thought we had was great, was really just a vitamin. And an aspirin, like, well, if you have a headache, you'll run downstairs to the CVS and you'll pay $40 for an aspirin because you want that pain to go away. So, we sort of made that the linchpin of like what we're building. It's with a real estate organization, what we find is there's this organic chain of like, 2-3 people get together, they raise money, they buy a building. You start in Excel. Our biggest competitor is Excel.
Yeah.
But then you get to 5 employees, 10 buildings, 20 buildings. And at some point, Excel and these core tools can't service your business.
Right.
So you've now gone from, needing some software help as a vitamin to like, all right, we need to solve this problem. And that's where I think, we're able to solve. And without us, we feel like you're stuck in Excel until you get to this point where you have a ton of capital spend. So we're trying to kind of help that group in the middle.
Makes sense. It's amazing that people will do anything to move away from pain, but often very little to achieve gain. And I think that's part of just dealing with how humans are wired.
Yeah. I taught an entrepreneurship class, when I was bridging the gap and trying to make, I was like, there was an entrepreneurship opportunity at a local high school. And I was like, I'll pop in for an hour and teach this.
Yeah.
So it had me kind of go back to fundamentals, but, talking about selling, because selling was new, because I was a technologist. So foraying into like the business dev side was not a skill I naturally had, and still learning. There's lots to learn. But it's like, what are you selling? Like, people buy on emotions, right? And then there's like positive emotions and there's negative emotions. And, selling to fear and greed, we're like, we don't want to do that. But selling to, I need something because it makes my life better. It allows me to get out of the office and spend time because I'm not, churning out reports until 2 a.m. We could automate that. Or, FOMO is the other one. Like everyone else seems to be doing this. It must be valuable. So then the referral, the word of mouth come through. But that's where you really lean into like doing good work, reputation building, and sort of riding that wave.
What's that been like? We were talking about before the show, being a technologist that had to learn how to sell. How you kind of work through that? It sounds like you're still working through getting better at that.
Yeah, going into consulting in a career. So anyone younger, I would definitely recommend going to consulting, because all those organizations, Accenture, Deloitte, McKinsey, they're all up and out. Yeah. So you could be a technologist, but at some point you're going to fall out of the pyramid. So you get brought along on presentations and sales and deals and talking to CFOs and CIOs, and it primes you enough to get comfortable in that space of selling. and having conviction behind what you're selling. And from there, again, I think there's a lot of material out there that you could read, some of it good, some of it bad, and just making sure you're, again, using your mentors and getting the right recommendations on what to read, and then just making it your own. Because if you read something, you're like, I'm going to go emulate this thing that is so far away from my center of gravity, it feels and it sounds disingenuine. But finding something that fits your style, again, it just becomes natural.
Yeah, makes sense. We were also talking earlier, obviously a lot of our listeners, most of the world's thinking about, what does AI mean for me? What does it mean for you and your clients? And how are you helping them tackle the challenges or opportunities around it?
Yeah, it's big, right? If you look at like technology trends, like, cloud migrations was where I started. So people are like, well, why are you moving to the cloud? But people saw the value. And I think the next big wave was RPA and automation, which was pre-AI, also valuable. Then we saw blockchain. Personally, I think that was...
I still don't get it.
I get it. I don't think there's as much enterprise value in it.
Yeah.
AI is going to change the world, and we could probably go on hours just talking about AI, the AI application. In industry, it's an interesting time because I don't think anyone's an expert. It's just,
I'd agree.
It hasn't been...
too new.
Yeah, like...
Does it take 10,000 hours to be an expert? Has anyone spent 10,000 hours in AI outside of Silicon Valley? I'm going to guess no.
Yeah, unless you were like one of like the research folks that were in it prior. Like, have we hit a total of 10,000 hours? And like, if most people got an intro to it 2 years ago. So I think you have a couple. You have pioneers, you have sort of innovators, and then you have just like people that like to nerd out in it. So we all sort of fall in that category, and we're taking these concepts to our clients right now. With full transparency that like we're also still figuring this out, but we are seeing like, what's a valid use case, what's a valid use case you need to drop and move on. So early on we saw, well, I want to talk to my data.
Yeah,
I think that's been a general flop across the board. It's just, again, it's a vitamin. If you're a CIO or CEO, I think you just want a report in your email every morning that's like, here are my numbers.
I don't need to know what to do.
Yeah, strip out the step of being like, what is my financials, right? Just tell me what I need support. So I think that's one everyone latches onto because it's the easiest one to understand. Then moving on to like agentic and true like workflow and agentic, I think we've all moved into the middle. Like I think it's workflows enhanced by AI, and there's a lot of value there. And we're, that's sort of where we're pushing forward on is build things that have guardrails around it. But the agentic portion does a lot of like the critical processing for you and loops back. The dream, and I don't think anyone's there yet, is true agentic. You give it the problem and it figures out what to do end to end. You don't even have a UI on, like, there was a concept of like, you don't even have a screen anymore. The AI will come back and generate the UI for you on the fly. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, just versus like what's real versus what's not. And the big decision point is, where do you wait? Because the ideas a lot of folks had 6 months ago, had you invested, like $1 million to build that solution, probably you could now just do organically with an API call.
Yeah. It's amazing how fast it's moving. We took an AI first strategy as a firm and then kind of shared what we've done for ourselves with everyone else and then helping them figure out what to do next. But I think it's an area where we're all still learning and trying to figure it out. And the winners are going to be those that figured it out early, in my opinion. Yeah.
The best model I think we've seen is where you build something where, the analogy is like use the AI as the engine. So you're going to build the car and that's going to be rigid and that's going to be pretty structured. But every time the model changes, the engine gets swapped out for you.
Yep.
So you're riding the acceleration of the AI model. Your thing will just get better. So every 6 months, without having to touch another line of code, whatever you built just got better.
Yeah.
And you're not investing the money. OpenAI is investing the money.
Totally agree. Yeah. Anyone who's training models, I think it's silly. You got all these people throwing all this cash at us. We have framework where you just swap the models out and you just take advantage of whatever's new. I think you're thinking about it the same way. So
yeah. And then also if you understand what model's best for what, that becomes really powerful too, right? So like Mistral's great for OCR, Claude is great for code, and you could string them together and just have them sort of work in a framework. I think, like I said, pioneers right now are probably the best spot to be in. And in 8 years, they'll become the expert that everyone wants.
We could totally spend the next hour talking about it, but we are running short on time. And To close out, I'd love for you to share, any closing thoughts or words of wisdom of those that are listening and thinking about taking that first step, because you're still very early on, but you've been at this a few years and you're seeing a good degree of success, but obviously challenges along the way. What kind of final closing thoughts would you share with our audience?
Yeah, I feel like I should have started earlier than I did,
Yeah.
right? There's never a good time. And if you have that, you're really assessing risk. So there's risk in staying at a job and staying at a job too long.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks are like, if I leave and I go start my own thing and I fail, that's the end. It's not the end. You were probably really good at your job and you could probably go right back to it, right? So really assessing like, what is the risk threshold of going and trying? And then when you go try, a lot of folks are like, cool, I'm going to go eat ramen all day long. And you don't need to do that. I don't recommend doing that. And you have a small child, you can't feed a small child ramen either.
No.
Right? So there are ways to make the leap, make an educated guess, do it risk-free. Like there's always you could consult on the side. You could work part-time on the side and build. And if all fails, the risk isn't you're out of money and you're moving back home with your folks. It's you go back to your job and, look at things in the 10-year window rather than the 5 or 1.
Yeah, I think, as you said earlier, most people overestimate what they can do in a year, but underestimate the decade or 5-year period, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you for making the time to come on the Grit Mindset. It was great having you and catching up with you. For our audience out there, we'll make sure we post Vimal's social links and a link to his website. Been great having him on the show. Hopefully you can take some good key points away. So for all you out there, until next week, stay gritty.